Welcome to Manager Tools. Today's cast, How to Roll Out MTDISC to Your Team, Part 1. The questions this cast answers are, how do I share my MTDISC results with my directs? Should I encourage them to take MTDISC? And how do I educate them about MTDISC? If you want answers to these questions and more, keep listening.
Folks, since this cast is about MTDISC and rolling it out to your team, I want to start with maybe the most important thing I can tell you about us making it easier for you to roll it out to your team. We lowered the price enormously. We cut the price over 50%. I think it used to be $72, and now we only charge $30 for it. We make less on the MTDISC now than we used to with our previous vendor. But the reason we do that is so that more of you, if you're a manager, can share MTDISC with your team. And I can tell you, the single greatest experience I ever had with MTDISC, or I ever saw with MTDISC, was a manager doing this very thing, rolling it out to his team, and frankly, admitting his weaknesses. And it really improved morale in the team when people started talking openly about, this is what I prefer, and what do you prefer, and so on. And they got to have higher morale because they communicated more effectively with one another. And that's why we lowered the price.
We highly recommend our MTDISC instrument. It's a behavioral instrument, and it's the best tool that we were able to come up with, frankly, for focusing on behavior. And behavior is important. It's important because individual behavior is the cause of all organizational results.
Right.
And because managers are responsible for results first, it makes sense for us to consider a tool that provides a group of common framework for seeing, hearing, discussing, measuring, and changing behavior. That's exactly what MTDISC does. So, what we're going to talk about today is how do we get MTDISC started with our team? The first steps are to take it yourself and then tell your team to do the same. So what's on our outline this week?
We're going to cover take MTDISC yourself, share your MTDISC with your team in a staff meeting, post your MTDISC publicly afterwards, tell them to take MTDISC, have them share their MTDISC in a staff meeting, and have them post their MTDISC publicly. So quite a bit in this cast, all focus on MTDISC and behaviors because, as we said, the aggregated behaviors of your directs are your results.
You bet. And you want those to be good.
We hope.
That's the goal. That's always the goal.
So we start with take MTDISC yourself. If you've already taken MTDISC, awesome. You've already experienced the accuracy and, frankly, down-to-earth nature of the guidance that's in it. You already know it's not going to be over anyone's head. It's simple. It's clear. We don't use any fancy language. We are speaking directly to you as we would if we were face-to-face. It's part of our idea around that it's something that is communicated clearly without, extraneous words or extra information, things that you might just get confused by or that you might not need, to be honest with you, because some of the other assessments out there have some stuff that maybe you don't need at work or that is not helpful for us.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've already taken it, great. If you haven't taken MTDISC yet, the things to know are that MTDISC is a behavioral instrument based on what in behavioral science is known as an interpersonal circumplex. So I just said no fancy language, but here we go. That's a fancy word for a circle cut up into 4 quadrants, which are made by having 2 orthogonal, perpendicular, axes through the center, which you could probably picture. Lots of instruments use this model because it allows them to plot answers against 2 different and unrelated concepts represented by the 2 axes, horizontal and vertical. It's a well-developed technique. When I talk about this in trainings, the idea that we're plotting 2 unrelated things, I always talk about the number of red cars in New Jersey versus the number of raccoons in Texas. And I don't know where I got that thing. I made that up.
You made that up?
Yeah, I think I must have. I don't know why those are the 2 unrelated things.
They're
like
both
that.
fun and unrelated.
I guess there are a lot of raccoons. I actually think there's a lot of both of those things in
I
New
would agree.
Jersey and Texas.
Mm-hmm.
So, okay, if you think about two unrelated things, the theory of DISC is really asking two questions. One, represented by the horizontal axis, asks, do you see your environment as favorable or unfavorable?
Mm-hmm.
And by environment, we mean the people around us, because humans are naturally social creatures. So not rocks, trees, or raccoons, but the people around us. Half of the people in the world see their environment as favorable, meaning they see other people as generally good and friendly.
Mm-hmm. And
the other
half of the world, sees the environment as unfavorable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. What that means is they see others generally as those who are not to be trusted
Mm-hmm.
or as potential threats, right? And it's important to note here, guys, that the sign of an accurate or useful circumplex-based tool is that it equally divides the population. Note another thing Kate mentioned a moment ago. You can probably picture that in your head. And if you're a licensee, you can print out the show notes and there'll be some explanation graphics inserted into the show notes so that you can look at the diagrams while we're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so as a general rule, the half of the population that sees the people around them as unfavorable tends to meet people by initially keeping some distance, right?
Yeah.
That is, they don't trust immediately. Trust is earned to those people, right? They keep folks at an arm's length. When they first meet someone, they would say, well, I'm not sure if this is the stranger that's going to actually earn my trust. So at first, at least at the beginning anyway, let's not let them too close. Right? There's like that inner circle for us, and we don't let people into it unless those people have earned a spot in that inner circle. And the benefit of that, of course, is that those individuals don't get burned nearly as often.
Right. If you don't let people into the inner circle quickly, there's less danger. Because once in the inner circle, someone can hurt you more easily.
Yeah.
So keeping people at arm's length gives
Take
us
advantage of you,
some safety.
for sure.
Yeah. If anyone listening is thinking, yeah, I get that, because I only have like 5 really close friends. The next thing that usually comes to mind is, but they're my real friends.
Yeah, right. Judgy.
Because the downside of this view is not having a ton of friends.
Yeah.
Some folks are turned off by that initial distance and kind of arm's length behavior, the lack of warmth. And it's especially true, of course, for those people who are in the group that view people as friendly.
Yeah.
If you're in the group that sees the environment as unfavorable, the favorable people, that group, they see this as like, keep away. And they listen and they keep away.
And they keep away.
They keep away. So the people on the unfavorable environment side are on the left side of the horizontal axis, the left hemisphere. And because of seeing their social world this way, when they are at work, they tend to focus on tasks rather than on people.
Mm-hmm.
We know about that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We do. We're the people who, when faced with an overwhelming amount of work, the only reasonable answer for how to accomplish all that is sit down, shut up, and do it. Don't talk to any of the other people.
Right.
Just lock yourself in a quiet room and get it all done. Those of us that are on that side, we have a more linear, rational approach, right, to our work. We tend to sit down, we make lists, we approach the work in a very linear fashion because we tend to think in a more binary kind of way. Right? It's easy for us to determine what should be done first based on organizational need.
Sarah once said to me out loud in front of a conference group, leave your feelings at home under the bed where they belong.
Essentially.
I mean, that's where you left yours, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
That's where mine, the one, stays all of the time.
That's where we keep them, under the bed.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. The other half of the world, the half that see the people around them as favorable, tend to meet people and almost immediately like and trust and bond with people. I was in Chicago once and I had some people at the conference. And one of the guys in the group was telling me how he had just flown in from Paris. I don't know what he was doing in Paris. He'd just flown in and he had met a girl on the plane and invited her to his birthday party.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And really at this point, because since then I have also made a friend on a plane and become quite good friends with them. Haven't invited them to any parties though. What was funny was I remembered the experience distinctly of him telling me, yeah, I met her on the plane. I invited her to my birthday party. And I thought to myself, gosh, I hope she's cute because you're going to get robbed.
Yeah.
Like, you don't know this girl.
Yeah. Do we know that she's not a murderer? We don't know.
We don't know. And neither did he.
Yeah, exactly. Here's my home address.
Yes. So this person, right, knows they can get along with any new person.
Totally.
The benefit of living this way is that you have a lot of friends.
Absolutely.
I don't know if everybody listening, and I don't know if you know this, Sarah, there's a limit to the number of Facebook friends you could have. Did you know that?
I did know that. I've not ever gotten near the point of stretching that boundary.
Oh, I'm not accusing you. I'm suggesting that there's a group of people, these, favorable environment people who are bumping up against that 5,000 person limit of Facebook friends.
Yeah. It's a lot.
A lot of friends.
A lot of friends. And that's a great thing. The downside, though, because there's always a downside. We didn't mention this specifically, clearly, obviously, but no, both sides of the circle have got their ups and downs.
Two sides to all these coins.
Absolutely. The downside to this approach, this warm, welcoming, trust all the people immediately, don't verify sources. Don't verify sources. Absolutely. Let them in the inner circle. Is that they tend to get burned more easily. Imagine that. If you let someone close to you, you make them your friend right away. You meet them on Saturday and they're coming to your birthday on Tuesday, and their values are not aligned with yours, or they aren't worthy of the trust that you've bestowed upon them immediately without checking any of the facts. When there's a conflict, you're close to them. And the damage tends to be a lot worse, right? They can hurt you. They can take advantage of you. And those things hurt, which is echoed by the phrase, wearing one's heart on one's sleeve.
Yeah, these people did not leave their feelings at home under the bed.
No, they brought them all.
They brought them all.
And their cat's feelings.
Yeah, and the girl from the plane's feelings.
Yes, hers.
These favorable environment people, the people on the favorable environment side, if you will, are on the right side of the horizontal axis. They're in the right hemisphere. Because of seeing their world this way, when they're at work, they tend to focus on people rather than on tasks. They tend to connect with others, chat a lot, be more emotional, want to talk things over in meetings and hash things out and discuss and brainstorm and build strong and trusting relationships. The thing is, neither of these approaches are right. They're just approaches.
Yeah, they're just different.
It's just different. Two sides to all of the coins. There's each side, and then each side has its own ups and downs. One of the benefits of MTDISC is that our own way isn't the right way. It's just our way. MTDISC is actually a celebration of behavioral diversity.
Yeah. All of these people exist. And MTDISC is a tool to help us be aware of the fact that people have different experiences than we do. They see the world in a different way. And that's also okay. Our way is not the best way. It's just our way. How do we understand more about ourselves and others?
Because the other good thing to note about this is that the upside of one person's approach is balanced by the downside of the other person's approach. And so if we have multiple approaches, there's a chance that we have coverage for the flip side of our coin in the other person's approach.
Totally.
So that's one half of the equation, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the left and right side.
You bet. Now it's the top and bottom of this circle. The other question that MTDISC, the theory itself, represents is how one views one's relative sense of power toward their environment. Again, environment in this context is representative of the people around us. And half of the world sees themselves as more powerful than their social environment. The other half then sees themselves as less powerful. And this distinction, when envisioning our circumplex, is represented by the horizontal axis. So we have a circle with a top and a bottom half.
Mm-hmm. It's best to describe this difference with an example. And slight disclaimer here, because I just want to remind people, your brain does this without asking you about it.
Tricks on you.
It's very much kind of like it's an instinctual series of things. And the way to imagine this, your reaction, which side you fall into, is imagine yourself walking into a meeting room with 30 people in it. Half of the people in the world, when they walk in, are aware of all 30 people in the room and tend to scope their focus down to the 1 to 2 people they either know best or are physically nearest to.
Mm-hmm.
When describing their ability to influence the group, they see themselves as more powerful than those 1 to 2 people that they've focused on. They believe they can exert influence on them.
Mm-hmm.
These people on that more powerful side are towards the top of the circle, the top half or hemisphere of the circle, top of that horizontal axis above it. Because of seeing their social world this way, when they are at work, they tend to be assertive, which means faced with uncertainty, they take action. They tend to move quickly, be forceful, take risks, and are comfortable with uncertainty.
Which takes us then to the other half of the circle, the other half of the room, or the world, I should say, the people who, when walking into that room of 30 people, isn't as quickly, as readily, as easily able to scope it down. When they walk in, they don't identify 1 to 2 people whom they can connect with. Instead, they see a group of 30 people. I don't know what the definition of horde is, but 30 is a lot of people. And of course, they think to themselves in that case, I'm less powerful than all of these 30 people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a group of 30 people when compared to myself. Therefore, anyone who thinks that they are more powerful than this group of 30 people, they are an egomaniac. There's no way I can compete with this group of 30 people. It's like a pit of sharks. I'm not diving in.
Oh, yeah. I just never heard the phrase a pit of sharks.
A pit of sharks.
I like it.
Yeah. It's true. Some of us are sharks.
Mm-hmm.
Hint, hint. We do exist in that pool. All right. So those who see the world in this way are mapped on the circumplex on the lower half of the horizontal axis. So when you're looking at the circle, the bottom hemisphere of the circle. And because of their approach, they tend to be reserved in their actions and in their dealings with other people. When faced with uncertainty, they don't dive right in. Rather, they pause. They step back. They move more slowly when they engage in a project or a task that they're not really sure of. They're cautious. And when approaching new situations of change, they seek to reduce risk wherever and whenever possible. They generally prefer the status quo to change. Change is uncertain. Change causes concern. They'd rather it stay the same than be faced with that uncertainty.
You know, folks, I mentioned in the last public service announcement we had here about weaknesses. We talk about weaknesses. Everybody has them in your MTDISC report. and you should know what they are. And you should be cautious about the times when you're thinking about work you have coming up and you recognize that they're going to call on something that you think of as a weakness. Now, don't kid yourself. We're not saying that it's a weakness compared to everybody else in the world. It's a less strong strength for many of us who are highly effective, highly successful people. If you're listening to this cast, you're probably highly successful, and yet you still have relative weaknesses, and you ought to know what they are. And that's part of what MTDISC does. No professional glosses over his or her weaknesses. They know what they are, and they go to their strengths, and they're aware when their weaknesses are going to be a problem.
If you have kept up with the description, or if you're looking at the show notes, what we have now are 4 hemispheres in our circumplex. People in the top hemisphere tend to be assertive. People in the bottom hemisphere tend to be reserved. People in the left hemisphere tend to be task-focused, and people in the right hemisphere tend to be people-focused. If you lay these images in your mind over each other, the intersections of those hemispheres create 4 quadrants: top left, top right, and bottom left, in clockwise order, labeled D, I, S, and C, from which we get the name DISC. So these 4 quadrants, D, I, S, and C. And there's other, there's labels for them. So D stands for dominance. High Ds are in the top left quadrant, the intersection of assertive and task-focused hemispheres. These are the forceful, take no prisoners, rough around the edges people. Mm-hmm. They like to get
stuff in a china shop sometimes.
Feelings at home. They like to get immediate results, make quick decisions, cause action, take authority, solve problems. Like, you have a problem, I can fix that for you.
Oh, yeah. I love solving other people's problems. Even when they're not a problem, I will solve them.
Yeah. The high D is the person who puts your suitcase in the car, even though it's empty, because it wasn't my job to pack your suitcase. It was my job to put it in the car. And I could tell you something. It's in the car. And it's not my fault you don't have socks.
Yeah. Mm-mm.
The thing is, we've talked about 2 sides of the coin. There's some great things about what high Ds can accomplish. There's also the perception for all profiles that there's some downsides to some of the things that happen. And unfortunately, other people often see high Ds as intimidating, unapproachable, insensitive, and impatient.
Absolutely. All right. So following around the circle in a clockwise fashion, now in the top right quadrant, it is I. The I stands for influence. It's at the intersection of assertive and people-focused hemispheres. Eyes are in your organization the sales, marketing, customer success kinds of people. They network well. They have huge networks, great at chatting with people that they've never met before. They smile, they shake hands, they're inspirational, right? They inspire others to action as well. They can easily cause others in a room based on the fact that they're speaking in an excitable fashion, loud, quickly, to be excited as well. Mm-hmm. They love leading groups. They love brainstorming, all of those kinds of things. They have a million friends. To Kate's point, these are the people that have hit the threshold of the number of people you're allowed to connect with on social media. Mm-hmm. They hit it. And they believe image matters. So they have, in my experience, they pay more attention to fashion, right? They'll usually wear something colorful, something that's flashy, something that causes other people to see them and say, oh, wow, that is a really cool jacket. Oh my gosh, I love this jacket. Do you want to go for coffee? We can talk about jackets. It's just a really good way of meeting new people who also like the same cool things you do.
Sure.
Now, eyes, unfortunately, again, have a perception to them. Other people often see our eyes as not detailed enough. Now, part of that they do to themselves because they'll say things like details, schmetails. Besides the point. They also tend to lack in organization. Like, it's not the Dewey Decimal System in their cubicle. And they do start a lot of things, and they don't finish all of them.
Mm-hmm. Best foot forward, dragging the other one behind.
You bet.
Continuing clockwise, we are now in the bottom hemisphere, which is reserved. And we've come to S. S stands for steadiness. S's are in that bottom right quadrant at the intersection of reserved and people focused. They are people focused like I's and reserved in their behaviors and interactions. S's make great team players. They believe in loyalty and harmony. They're often thought of as maybe the therapist or grandmother or grandfather of the group. They have a candy dish on their desk.
Yeah, they're so sweet.
Yeah.
They're so sweet.
They're empathetic. They're fantastic listeners. It can also be true that other profiles might see S's as indecisive. S's say things like, I could see how that idea might be a good one, or I could see how both ideas would be positive. They could seem indirect. The high S version of that's a terrible idea is, I understand where you got that, or that's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. Something to think about.
Consider. S's can also be seen as unwilling to change.
Absolutely. All right, following around our circle, we're at the bottom left quadrant. It is the C. It stands for conscientiousness. C's are reserved, like S's, being that they're also on the bottom of the circle, and are task-focused, like the high D's. Within your organization, these people can generally be found as they are engineers and accountants and software developers. They're generally found anywhere you have a role that requires very binary thinking. They're thorough and accurate, and they know their details. Right? They oftentimes are involved in the creation of many of the processes within your organization. They're careful, and because they tend to play their cards close to the vest, are often wonderful diplomats. C's are found in secure locations, holding on to data that other people shouldn't find out about. And I've found that C's also flourish in roles like that because they have what we think of as a very stoic face. Their facial expression doesn't differ. The best and worst days of their lives look the same on their face. It just, you can't tell. So they don't accidentally let the cat out of the bag. It's just not something that would ever occur to them. And their face doesn't show it either.
Yeah, great poker face.
Exactly. Now, unfortunately, others can see the C's as perfectionists, right? They know a lot of data. They know all of the information. If they make a recommendation, it is the right one based on the data. Therefore, if you pose a differing opinion, they can tend to be unwilling to bend at all. Right? They tend to also get stuck on the details versus the big picture. And they come across as cool or aloof in their dealings with others, not very emotive in their communications.
Getting back to our process. Do not roll out MTDISC to your team until you have done it yourself and modeled this process. That will worry them unless you do something to show that you're going to go first. It's been our experience that many of you will be concerned about what your MTDISC will say. You will then think, well, if we all do it together, then mine won't be center stage quite as much. The focus won't be on me. Our experience with hundreds of managers is that doesn't help at all.
Yeah. Now, for a couple of reasons. I mean, first, because you have power over your team. And there's only one of you, but several of them. The focus, if done all at the same time, is going to be on you, whether you intend it or not. I mean, not by design. You think by doing it in a group that you'll blend in. That's not what happens. If you and your team do the MTDISC together, their focus on your profile will make it even harder for them to focus on their own profile. And because you'll likely be leading a meeting to introduce the concept, that is, you're going to talk about your profile more. Unless you're better than the average manager at running meetings, that is.
Which may be true, and maybe not.
Exactly. But part of the reason you'll do this is because you need to use examples in your briefing and your explanation of the tool. So surely you'll do it by making yourself the example. Because that's what makes the most sense. That's the profile you're going to know and understand the best. But What actually happens is that everyone's going to be drawn to their own profile mentally while having to listen to you about your profile at the same time. And ultimately, that meeting ends up being a total waste of time for them. Once they get their profiles, we'll let them focus on their own.
Good.
First, let's start with you.
Yeah, we're not saying here that you need to tell your team that you're taking MTDISC. You can do this first step all by yourself. Go to manager-tools.com. It's only $30 and it only takes 30 minutes. You'll have your report the moment you're done. If you end up being uncomfortable about what you read, you can stop right there. We don't recommend stopping.
Yeah, no.
And you could if you don't love it. It also gives you a chance to think about what you've read, prepare for sharing your profile in the meeting. Think about it.
Mhm.
Also, if when you read your MTDISC output report, you find some points that are hard to read, fear not.
Welcome to the rest of us.
Your profile isn't the only one like that, y'all.
Uh-uh.
Every person's profile lists strengths and weaknesses, talents, chances for growth, and trust us. Your directs already know every single one of your weaknesses.
Yeah, they do.
Your role really magnifies your weaknesses to your directs. And
Mhm.
y'all, I can tell you this, there are 4 profiles. You are in good company.
Yes, exactly.
You are right there with the rest of us. Welcome to they, which, yeah, we have a cast on that. It's not about this.
No, but it's got lots of meanings. The sentence has lots of meanings.
Yes.
That's the point. Okay. Now, despite what you may fear, the predominant comments from directs whose bosses have followed this process, that is, have done it first and then shared it with the team and briefed it, etc. Those directs have not said, "Oh, well, the data proves you're a jerk." That's not what they've said. I mean, instead, they've actually said, "Wow, they're being really open with us about their weaknesses. That's pretty impressive." To be able to stand up here and talk about it. I like this openness. Now, put differently, if you take MTDISC and you don't share it, don't ever complain about your direct not being open enough with you.
You just abdicated that,
Yeah, you're not willing to share with them things that they already know.
right?
So you can't get mad at them in future. Thanks all. We'll be back next week with a continuation of today's topic.